Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I greet you with the universal welcome of peace and love. A very good evening. This is Health Matters. We welcome you to Nutrition Week. It's all about health, wellness, your diet, your food, but looking at it in a holistic approach. We might even cover fertility. So please stay tuned as we have the specialist intervening in your questions, comments and queries. Don't forget to send them. Is your diet working? You've cut out sugar. You're drinking, you think, more water. Is that enough? We have been in lockdown, so we have been going a little bit crazy for the winter season, doing what we can do. Exercise is very much there, but not as stable. So let's see what our specialists say throughout the show. But let's hear from our weekly wellness corner from our coach, Zaid Ishmael. Life coach, author, mental health advocate, single dad, so much more. We have Zaid Ishmael online with us. Shukran so much, Zaid, for joining us. A pleasure chatting to you. Thanks for making time for us and our viewers. We want to look, and welcome to Health Matters. How are you doing?
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah for having me here. I'm really good. Excited to be here.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So you're going to be a benefit to us and the rest of the South African crowd and beyond. Please note that you can join us via YouTube, ITV Networks.TV. Tell your friends and family to listen now. Live stream wherever they are in the World Wide Web. Okay, so Zaid, we want to look at Nutrition Week. People are talking about nutrition around the world. Lockdown is easing in South Africa, but in some places it's not. So people are still, binging. They're eating, what they shouldn't be eating. They're living a lifestyle very much in isolation sometimes and around the world. But in South Africa, we're coming out a bit. I just spoke to a relative of mine yesterday, and she was out cycling, which is so nice to see, we're back into the swing of things. And how do we get that momentum going? So that's what we want to talk about. It's not just about food, diet. It's redefining our bodies not just as this vessel needing to be a certain weight, a certain look, a certain way. So let's talk about holistic nutrition.
Holistic. That's always a very tricky approach because everyone has a different interpretation of what holistic means, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to the body, I always like to kind of reverse the way we look at it because the body is more a vessel of expression or a signaling system, I like to call it. A signaling system for what's happening to us emotionally and spiritually. So like you mentioned with people that have gone binge eating and are now struggling with weight issues or other health problems as a result of lockdown and the extended duress that they experienced as a result of that. One of the things that I hope people will start realizing is that their bodies didn't take a beating because of the lack of activity. It's actually reflecting the emotional and spiritual duress that they've been experiencing for a prolonged period. And that's an important point of departure because the moment you start seeing your body as something independent of your emotional and spiritual state, then you start treating it as if it's independent of that, and then you lose the balance that you can strike between them to have this sense of holistic wellness that we all so desperately look for.
It's interesting how you say, your body's tied to how it's going to react. So if you've got diabetes, if you've got, depression, if you're all of a sudden craving for fish, we don't exactly tie that to the lack of what our body is telling us is happening. Why is that connection not happening with us?
I think it's because we're so conditioned into believing that our body is a physical form that has its own needs, independent of everything else, right? So that's why I think this whole approach of mind, body, spirit is problematic because it reinforces this belief that we operate in a spiritual domain and in this mindful or brain domain versus the physical domain. And then we treat them separately. But if we step back and we observe, we'll see that it's our spiritual state that defines how we experience our emotional state, which is the mind and brain space. And then that informs how we express it through our physical state.
Let's talk about.
If we look at the body.
Yeah, sorry. No, I thought you were taking a pause there. Let's talk about the hormones.
Hormones is a reflection of our emotional state. So obviously there's some physical biology that is at play, right? But I always like to look at what is the exception rather than the norm, because the exception tells us what is possible, whereas the norm tells us what is probable because of societal norms. And how that plays into the whole hormone discussion is that our hormones, if it was as influential as we believe it is, as being the precursor to how we feel, then everyone would experience it in a very similar manner. But the fact that there are some people that have no significant response to hormonal changes or don't have any major hormonal fluctuations compared to others who have a lot of it, it leads us to question whether or not it's the hormones that actually trigger the emotional space, or is it the emotional space that's actually triggering the hormonal imbalance. And in all my years of coaching and everything and all the research I've done, it's definitely our emotional space that influences our hormonal balances more than anything else. So you have a natural balance, and that natural balance is thrown out because of our emotional and spiritual state that we find ourselves in. That's why I keep saying that the body is a signaling system to the emotional and spiritual space. So when we see something appearing as an illness or duress or dysfunction in the body, what we should actually be doing is not just looking at treating that symptom. We should be backtracking that or seeking the logical pathway back to what does that tell us about our emotional and spiritual state. Because we'll find the coherency there. There's a collaboration there.
Okay, let's look at our nutritional needs and what our body wants when it comes to diet. And often we use diet very negatively. It just gives you this negative connotation once you mention diet, although they're supposed to be positive, but somewhere in your brain and your body there's immediate restriction. Let's talk about the difference between diet and moderation, maybe.
That's actually a very valid point, an excellent point, because moderation is different from diet. The way we generally understand diet is that we have to include certain food groups, exclude certain food groups, and measure portions, and there's multiple approaches to it, right? But the thing is, if you focus on the diet intake, that means that you are treating the physical space only, and you not considering the emotional and spiritual space that influences what you take in. The other important point that I always like to make is that we'll never crave something that we've never had before, that we've never tasted. And that, to me, gives us an important insight into how our bodies work. You see, as we grow up with whatever it is that's part of our staple diet in our own specific cultural space, that teaches our body what it can get from the different things that we eat. And when we get those cravings, it's because there's something lacking. Now, something could be lacking because we might have just been irresponsible or reckless or lost sight of how we might have been overindulging in maybe junk food or something else. But the other side of it also is that and especially now with lockdown, a lot of people that have been binge eating or to get rid of the boredom and to deal with stress, that is a signal to say that emotionally, we haven't been responding well to this change in circumstance, and to compensate for it, we've been comforting ourselves.
Yeah.
So when we talk of comfort food and we talk of emotional eating, that's the signals that something else is wrong. And we need to rather try and focus and understand what is that something else that makes us feel uncomfortable or stressed about that circumstance, rather than just thinking, oh no, I need to go on a diet because I'm eating too much.
So pointers to watch out there when you are thinking of, going over, there's something more happening in the body. And so rather delve into your emotions and your mind, body and soul connected. Connect with zaidishmael.com on his World Wide Web and find out more of this great information that he's just expressed to you. Thank you so much, Shukran Zaid. All the best till we chat again. Do keep well and keep up with the great work that you're doing, alhamdulillah.